All right. Hello, everyone. So good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in from, and welcome to our webinar. You're listening to ICSIA Talks episode 16, demonstrating information development business value. I'm Sydney Jones, the head of marketing communications here at ICSIAsoft, and I will be your host. Now, for those of you who've never listened to our program before, ICSIA Talks is a webinar series that covers data, agile document management, localization, ICSIAsoft's very own CCMS, and more. Episodes are released periodically and cover a wide range of topics in the tech-comm industry. Before we get started, let's run through two housekeeping details. First off, this presentation is being recorded, and we'll send you a link to the recorded version an hour or so after it airs, so you can share it with colleagues who weren't able to make it. If you would like to ask a question during the webinar, please type it into the questions section of your control panel at any point during the presentation, and we will answer these during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So now on to our show. Our guest today is Information Development Manager Molly Barrett, and Molly is tuning in from the greater Milwaukee, Wisconsin area. So Molly, welcome to ICSIA Talks.
Thank you, Sydney. Nice to be here.
All right, so before we get started, I'll just let you introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, I'm Molly Barrett. Sydney said I'm based in the Milwaukee, Wisconsin area. I have been a technical writer, a consultant, a trainer, and I specialize in XML-based authoring solutions. And I'm past the 30-year mark, so I've been doing this a very long time.
Okay, so Molly, I'll let you cover the agenda before we dive in.
The agenda is very simple. Today, we're just going to give you some background on what drove this session and how I arrived at presenting it. But then we're going to talk about two life cycles. One is the project life cycle, and then we're going to talk about the content life cycle and how to work with them to demonstrate business value. And then we'll have some QA if you have questions after that. This session is based on my experience working with information development teams over many years, but specifically, most recently, I worked with a team of around 25 information developers who worked in an agile development environment. They supported up to 90 products, software products a year, small, medium, or large. And we built our success as a team by doing solid information development work, but also by developing data that addressed business goals and the information role in making a project successful. We focused on estimating, benchmarking, and communication. And we identified touch points and disciplines to provide information to the business, not just for the for the content creation process itself. I will tell you that in this session, I'm going to be talking about how information developers worked on a safe agile release train as a shared service. They would no ID was dedicated full time to a team. Often it could be 2 IDs, 7 IDs, depending on the number of developers. And our work was ISO defined, so that means that the product had to be delivered with the software. And we delivered user assistance, that's the help, and other interface work that we did to the state of the sprint. So we delivered to the sprint. And we created our own user stories with no points. So as we moved into how are we going to kind of map out these touch points and how are we going to demonstrate our business value, we looked at it. We said, we know that the content life cycle is how we guide our world as information developers. But we looked at the content, the project life cycle, which was at the higher business level. And we mapped our ID work to business goals and objectives as opposed to tools and processes. We plan strategically, deliver tactically. We integrated into the developer work and into the product work and communicated across not the entire product, but outside our roles often. when I talk about strategy and tactics, people sometimes kind of go, yeah, but strategy really involves planning a next move, and tactics involve carrying out the plan. So the difference between the two concepts can be remembered as strategic is doing the right thing, tactical is doing things right. Before we get too deep into the presentation and the life cycles, I just want to kind of talk about your role in the organizational structure and how you must own your strategic role. So first of all, be visible. People must know you and trust you and to provide you the information you need to be successful. People must see what you are doing and how it is essential. So justify that you are essential. People who use your services 10% of the year won't see you as essential and important. Having a little value with each project from time to time is not the same as having deep value in the organization. So if you find yourself staying at your cube a lot, not really getting out and interacting with the rest of the project teams, many of the project teams, finding out what they're doing, how things are going for them, you really are isolating yourself so that you can't be aware of all the goals and objectives. When you're looking at the company goals and objectives, the biggest takeaway I can have at this point is to tell myself I have to be able to align what we do in information development to the highest level goals of the organization. So I need to know what the strategic goals for the company are in order to successfully support them, and then find a way to demonstrate the value that we have for those goals. And I'm going to say find a sponsor, and people seem to think, well, that's like a mentor, but I would say not. I would say find yourself a sponsor, someone in senior leadership who really knows what you do for the organization. They know who you are, what you do, and they will make sure that other people kind of know what what the skill sets you have and what value you are to the product and to the projects. And when you can, align yourself with high priority projects within a group that funds the projects. So finding your role there. So I'm hoping that these are the life cycles that I wanted to talk about, and let's take a look at both of them. I think they're pretty explanatory on their own, but the one that you see on the project life cycle is really just that. Have a good look at it, see how the same kind of model is used over in the content life cycle. And I hope that you have a CLC in your organization. And if you don't, it's something you might want to take a look at, because this was an explicit kind of process that you would be able to share with other people. I'm using the life cycle and have for years because it consists of the development stages that occur during a lifetime. So whether it's a chicken, whether it's the egg, it's really using a life cycle to determine what happens next. And it helps us make some choices, but it also helps us predict outcomes. A project life cycle helps guide the project managers through successful implementations from start to finish. It creates a framework to guide projects. The same is true of our content life cycle. We create a repeatable process that defines how meaningful content is developed and communication for that content is managed. So the first phase of the project life cycle is initiate. And in this phase, there are two documents I want you to be aware of if you can. One of them is the business case document, and this justifies the need for the project, and it includes an estimate of potential financial benefits. And then there's a feasibility study. This evaluates the project's goals, timeline, costs to determine the project should be executed and balances the requirements with the available resources to see if the project makes sense. I can honestly say without a loss that sometimes teams abandon projects because they're not profitable or they're not feasible. And projects that pass the two tests of business case and feasibility are the two that will likely be assigned and designated to the project office. So this is where business value is defined. ID costs may appear small. You may not even see a cost sheet, but they may be defined as small. Ask for what is needed to be successful in the project, but remember that not all requests are granted, and be prepared to negotiate. If you require training and it's not granted or funded, learning on the job may take longer during the project, so you'd have to adjust your hourly estimate. So now, what does that mean? The initiate PLC means for our CLC. Well, for us, it means research. And this research is one of our best opportunities to find out lots of things we know before we even start a project. So what business problem does this project solve? If you can't walk away from anything from this phase without this, you're not prepared to do the work. Does ID provide an estimate for effort to the project? Is ID informed and included in feasibility? So ask yourself these questions. Is travel required? Do I need training for something? Do we have enough staff? Are tools that are not available today are they needed? Is this project like another that we've developed in past? What are we going to propose as ID deliverables? What risk does ID see in this work? And do you need funding for something other than staff? And is there a stated time frame? And I want to just briefly show you what my initial estimate might look like when I share it with the team.
All right, so I'm just handing you over the control here, Molly. You should be able to share your screen.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yep, good to go.
Good. So this collects a lot of information that's good for me to have about this project before I even start it, and this is where I'm going to estimate it. I won't go over all of this in detail, but I will say that in looking at the business document and answering the questions I've noted earlier, I've come to put together this sort of outline of criteria that I need to cost out and be able to return to the project manager. And ultimately, I know because I have a lot of data from past projects about what our project overhead is going to look like. And then I'm loosely able to estimate the future work. And the projects that I have worked with like to get an optimistic number, a likely number, and a pessimistic number. So I'm really going to go to this project manager and share that I believe we're going to be likely at 550, and this is an estimate, and that'll require one full-time information developer at 30% for the duration of the project. We're not assigning anybody yet, but we've shared that information. And this is in a spreadsheet that I use through the entire project for this product. It's an initial tab, gather this information. So you want to go back to the slide?
Yes, we can. All right.
Okay, if you can answer the critical questions that will influence your work, your contribution will have an impact on cost, but also on your success in the project. Provide this initial estimate based on your past project benchmarking and answers to your probing questions. So let's move on to the next phase of the project, the plan. project lifecycle, project managers sort of marshaled their forces. They're here, and they've been given the approval to continue the project. So the feasibility and the business documents have been approved, and now we're ready to move on. So at this point, the project manager provides a well-written project plan. This gives the team direction for quality, risks, acceptance plan. It also helps the teams be aware of obstacles they may encounter and helps them understand cost and scope and time frame. A typical project plan consists of a statement of work, a resource list, work breakdown structure, a schedule, and a risk plan. Project plans have all of these documents that are necessary to make the project viable. And it could be in different types of software like Project or Confluence or Jira or Trello or Teamwork. Next slide. So for us, for the CLC plan, we're going to plan too. And at this point, we're not gonna start work yet. But what we are going to do is assign resources. We're going to develop a content plan. We're going to know who are the stakeholders, get very clear on what the requirements and the processes are, get agreement for our planned deliverables. And I want to just say here before we take a quick look at a simple content plan that the essential role and importance of an information developer can be diluted by value statements like, it's a big project, and I don't know, it's going to take as long as it takes. Without a content plan, ID works blindly. So drive your ID work with a content plan, a process, and hopefully some KPIs. Okay, let's go back to my screen. So this is a general set of estimate, a general project plan that I've put together. I've used this for some time now, and it was influenced by Joanne Hackos years ago. And this is what I usually use to be able to kind of communicate throughout the project. This is a dashboard, gives me kind of the full view of who's on the project, what am I doing with it, how many hours are there. I won't go over this in detail because that would be a whole presentation altogether. But I will show you that, for instance, I know that we have to write some help, and I have estimated these topics. Some of these are unknown, I'll stub them in, but currently these are in process, and I'm able to track that information. If I couldn't do it in a CMS, I would be able to say to myself, all right, this project is, this topic is in peer review. Someone is peer reviewing it for me today. And I've completed 2 hours on it. And this is a way that I kind of keep track. And we'll come to that a little bit later in our monitor section. But I know that these are the sort of basic things I have to write and deal with during the project. I also know that there's a lot of overhead in a project that doesn't have anything to do necessarily with my writing. So these are a lot of non-UA, non-user assistance efforts. And when I look at tracking them, first of all, they guide me, but second of all, I have to be able to account for them in time and see where I am in terms of completion. So when I work through it, I know I'm working on the help. This comes from these pages, the install UI text. I've got 60 hours left. I've done 20 hours on it. Release notes, barely started. My work items, I still have 289 hours left to do. And if I look at it from my dashboard, I really have 7 weeks left to do it. So this is the sort of thing that I work with, and I've had hundreds of these over time developed so that I can now say, let's go take a look at that project and see how well we did with it and what this is how I would use for benchmarking. Okay, let's go back. Thank you, sitting. So now we're, let's go down one more. We're going to prepare for the PI planning because I know that this is an agile project and we're going to have a program increment plan. So now we've got a plan. The project manager has a plan and we have a plan. And our content plan isn't done yet, but it's a start and we have a good guide. And so right now we're in the execute portion of the project life cycle. And this is the one everybody's most familiar with because it's the one that gets the most attention. Most people are involved in it. So what we're going to do is the project manager is going to work on managing people, processes, and communications. And he's going to, or she is going to decide the sequence of activities that happen during execution for the project scope, managing the team's work, recommending changes and corrective actions. Managing the project communication and stakeholders is very important because that's how he'll keep a grip on keeping the project flowing smoothly. Status meetings, and they'll be documenting change to the project if there are any. So execution relies heavily on planning and the work efforts that are produced during this that were produced during the planning session. Remember, as an info dev and your CLC, that cost, scope, and time frame are set. This is what we have to live with. Okay. We're in the we have a similar phase in the CLC, but us it would be a group of things. We estimate, we write, we edit and revise, and we review. And this is the one that we know. I mean, let's get started. And that's great because this is where our tactical work begins. This is where we shine. We know what our cost, scope, and time frame are. So now we've got an estimate. We go to the PI planning and we start sprinting. When we attend the ceremonies, we gather information and contribute to the planning of the project and the work, and we communicate our progress. Sprint reviews, sprint demos. An ID should always be ready to demo their own deliverable during a sprint review. And if it's not you, then a product owner, but make sure that it's visible and that just as they've demoed code, they're demoing the user assistance or the the visual text that goes into the product that we've worked on. And then, and sprint reviews communicate progress, positive, and risks. And if there are any barriers to completion, bring them up. This is where your team needs to hear it and where your project manager will be listening for barriers and risks. Focus on our tasks. That's what we love to do, and deliver to the sprints. There are lots of arguments around Agile and when InfoDev should deliver, but the business value tells me that we are working to deliver, especially in SAFE, we're working to deliver a slice of the program. Not to say that we deliver to 1 or 3 sprints, say in one PI. So when we do, that means that that's a shippable slice of product if everyone has delivered. And for InfoDev to be someone who's lagging behind does not demonstrate much business value. So then track your ID progress and content plans. You probably have user stories. That's not really sort of an issue, but just make sure that you know where you're working and what your hours are, what your progress is. So in the project lifecycle, monitor and control are often kind of lumped in with execution because when you're executing on a project, you really have to kind of look at it and say, how's it going? But it's called out as a separate phase in a lot of the PMI work. So this means that the project manager is going to be monitoring and controlling the project. And for us, we need to monitor and control our own progress. Every team does. Sometimes that's done through user stories and all of the ceremonies that we go through. But ID has a unique role in that they're not always on the release train. And so we need to be ready at any time to monitor and give our status that's clear. And let me see, our internal systems could be set up to gather this data. I mean, you could have user stories in Jira, but that may not give you the entire story. And it also oftentimes means that when we try to use tools that are not all connected, gathering that data and compiling is somewhat difficult. So some of the worst times I've ever had are trying to gather data from SAP and put it into some kind of intelligible report. So, and then we're going to just quickly take a look at the dashboard of our project. If you can, let me have this screen, Sydney.
Yes, I'll just hand that over.
Okay.
Okay, you should be good to go.
Good, thanks. So let's just look at it from here. And this is just a dashboard, and really what it tells me, are my dates, where am I, what's going on, how many hours do I have at this point, and then when I look here at my feature burn down, I can really see the number of hours I've completed, and I can say specifically what I'm working on and where I will be able to, I have 200 and I had 545 total hours, and I still have 298 some odd left. It's a lot for 7 weeks, but this is where I work, and it keeps me on track. And I can tell anybody who asks me at any given point in time, what is our status and where are we? So thanks, Sydney. Let's go back.
Okay.
Okay, so next slide. So again, as the project manager is monitoring and controlling, for in the content lifecycle, we want to keep an eye on our estimate content plan and keep it up to date. A lot of people say that is so much overhead and it takes so much time. But status is a business requirement. If you can't be clear number of hours, what risks you have, you're not really tuning into the business side of it. You're just doing sort of technical functional work, and that we don't know when it's going to be done, but we're working really hard. That's what I often hear. So be aware of your progress and status. Let other product teams know. You're going to see them in stand-ups. You're going to see them in sprint reviews and sprint planning and PI planning. Be visible. And when you're there, if there's a change in scope, or if something is creeping that you can see is going to have an impact, raise that concern, because it's really critical to the success of the product and of your perception of people's business awareness. Usually, if there is a change, any significant change, there'll be a change request. So that should help you if you have to re-estimate. So the entire time the project is going on, make sure you enter your time, let people know what you're doing, and be ready with your own monitor and control. Okay. Then finally, we get to the part of the project that's one of my favorites, which is called Project Close. And The project close is where everyone is so they're close. They're delivering. The customer has got the final product, but we're not finished. While we've delivered. This step in the project lifecycle allows a team to evaluate and document the project, and using the mistakes that they have encountered to make some stronger processes for the future and more successful teams. At this point, a project manager needs to know and have identified key project achievements and milestones and document the lessons learned for future projects. Same is true for us. So let's go to our next slide. For us, we need to complete our release documents. You have to verify, especially in an ISO organization, that you have met your quality requirements. Finalize your system files, make sure they're reproducible, evaluate what went well and what did not. And this isn't about being negative, this is about being a business person. Identifying ways to improve our ID processes and deliverables, and compile and deliver a release report. Sharing negatives with the recommendation for future positives, like if we do, this was a problem, but if we do this in the future, I believe we'll be better off. And better off would mean save money, or be faster, or quality would be higher. And those are the words that we would want to use, not we would be better off. So recognize people and teams that contributed to your success and thank them openly. When I talk about a release report, and I think this is pretty important, I know that many people don't ask for it, but I'm ready with a release report that tells the stakeholders in a project what were the customer goals that were satisfied and how did we satisfy them? Did we deliver on time to sprints and to the release? Did we over or underestimate? Do we have any future goals for our net improvement in our next release? Can we recommend process changes to improve for future performance? What is our KPI score? If you have 10 KPIs and they're all satisfied, it's worth saying a 10 of 10, a score 10 of 10. If of 10 you only satisfied 3, that's likely to be a problem for everybody, and you want to be able to kind of show people why. And some content metrics might be useful, especially if you're working with a system that you've said, well, this is if we buy this software and we do this, we're going to improve our performance by reuse or by time. So that's where you're going to want to be able to kind of help people understand a return on their investment. Okay. Which brings us down to a very simple life cycle alignment where we've gone through this and we've kind of chatted up around every aspect of it. But this is what an alignment of business value looks like when we use the content life cycle with the project life cycle. Hope that graphic is helpful to you, because it's pretty part of my writing religion.
Okay, is that it, Molly?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much for the presentation, and I'd now like to move us into our questions section. So just a reminder here that if anyone has a question, please ask it by typing it into the control panel, and we will answer as many of these as we can. So our first question, Molly, is can you provide the PLC track XLS spreadsheet?
I can. I would say that a spreadsheet is just a spreadsheet. If you don't know if you don't know what you're doing with it, and it may not meet your organization's goals. Again, I can say I got this information from Joanne Hackos. years and years and years ago. And one of the things I thought about it was like, oh, I could put this together in a spreadsheet. And I'm going to be honest with you, it's as automated as I can make it, but it's not perfect because I am not an Excel person. But that is one of the things that I've been able to use and develop over years. If you were working with Jira, you would want to be able to extract some kind of report that give you the same kind of data. Okay.
All right, so our next question is, you mentioned finding a sponsor. What should I look for and how do I approach someone?
Okay. A sponsor is not your boss. It's not your boss's boss. It's someone in the organization, and I would say do a skip level. Go not your skip up 2 levels. So if you are a senior information developer, then you're going to want to try to find maybe a director. If you are an information development manager, then you're going to want to try to find a vice president. So finding people like a sponsor is someone who's really going to just be aware. They don't need the details. They just need to be aware of your successes and where you need more input so that you can be more successful. And they have a level of visibility to senior management that others might not. So take a look. You're going to have to form relationships. That's a part of getting out and being visible. And after you've been seen in some meetings, it takes a little grit to do it. But talk to somebody about, just walk up and ask them if you could set some time to talk to them about your work and what your team does. It's not easy, but I've been able to do it in all organizations that I've worked in. And try to skip 1 level up. Your manager is going to be an advocate. That's their job. And this is your job. So everybody just assumes you're doing your job. What we need is a sponsor, somebody that's going to just kind of share with other people. Yeah, they do really great work. And here's one of the things they're doing. They've got this content lifecycle. Or have you seen what they use to track all that work? They'll talk about that sort of thing. So there you go.
All right, so our next question is, what are the variables that you have changed based on the change of the business objectives, time, budget, etc.?
That kind of comes down to conditional or essential determinations. And so if I see that we're not going to meet a date for some reason, I can look at my estimate, my content plan, and I can say I'm really uncomfortable with our progress at this point. We're not getting reviews back fast enough, or there's been a scope change. So we can deliver all of these things as promised if all goes as planned. But here's where the risk comes in, and we might not be able to. You wanted a manual, but I can deliver the help. I just might not be able to deliver a manual at the same time. Could be, it could be delayed to, might not be able to deliver a manual at factory acceptance testing. I might have to wait until the product is delivered completely. So those are the variables I look at. What could wait and what could be conditional. And one of the things I find often is like people get pretty hung up on format, and they also like to take on conversions during a project kind of life. So unless you've been allocated for that kind of work, you've got to stay away from it and get some time planned for that effort. But I can always look at my content plan and see, and the one that I showed you a bit ago is probably I'm behind on that project, if I'm honest. I'm looking at it. I got 7 weeks to do a lot of work, and I'm going to have to really winnow through that and see what I have to do. But we all know that the sprints and delivering to those sprints is, and the quality. Those are the things that we know are critical. And I watch info devs get sort of drug off to a sideline often because of conversion projects or reformatting, things that they're good to do, but it may not be a core business goal. Make sense?
Yes. So Molly, we have 2 more questions here. Our next one is, my team does not really have a CLC. We all work with different teams. This is not
Right.
really a question, but
Okay. Well, I think you've seen sort of working with a life cycle is helpful because when you work with teams, development teams, they like to do it a certain way, right? But having a repeatable process and a viable identity for information development. What do you do? How do you do it? And what are what are the rules? And those rules are very helpful in managing your work, not having other people manage your work. So it's just, I do these all the time. Excuse me, they're way more fun to do than they should be. So, you know, that's a part of strategic planning. And if you are not working with the kind of CLC and a way of strategic planning, then you're not being strategic and you're probably not going to be getting to the business value that you should.
okay. So for our last question, the project spreadsheet looks fairly complex. Are there other ways to track progress?
Sure, there are. For instance, you have a lot of user stories. You're working in a software development environment. So user stories. User stories, and depending on the software that you use, can be generated, and they can coalesce into a plan. I mean, it's an explicit part of your plan. And user stories are already there. There's no reason not to use them as a part of your content plan. You just want to be able to extract it so that you make sure you know the other data other than like, you know, is it done? What state is it in? I'm working on it. It's in tech review. So there's a lot that goes with setting up not just user stories, but then the metadata that goes around good content planning to be useful and provide business value. So I know there are, but it would take more development often. A spreadsheet for me is portable. I know all the metrics that I need to know about it, and I've just used it. So no matter where I go, I'll have it with me always. you know, and so it's easiest for me, but you will find your own way, and I would love to hear how other people do it.
Okay, so that's it for questions. And Molly, thank you so much for joining us today
Thank you.
and for being a part of ICSIA Talks. So that's a wrap for episode 16. Our next webinar is scheduled for September 3rd and will be about how to power up your content with taxonomies. So stay tuned for more details. Take care.
Okay, thank you.